folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is my reading wrap up for December 2023. It's a little bit late because all my plans for the first week of the year 2024 got a bit delayed because I ended up with a mild summer cold that was just annoying and not too bad, but I kind of babied myself a bit since I was on leave already. But yes, in December 2023, I did in fact read 16 things. Yes, I did. And I did actually, I will talk about my goals in a different video, but I did meet that goal. So yeah. So only one was by a non-white author, which is unfortunate, but I think about 6 of them involved queer characters of some significance. So so that was good. But yes, I did read 16 things. So what did I start with? I finished an audiobook that I had been reading for a while called Your Daughters of Freedom, The Australians Who Won the Vote and Inspired the World by Claire Wright. This was very interesting. It was quite long, but it was very interesting. It didn't just focus on the Australian fight. It focused on the various women who, particularly in Britain, took part in the fight for Britain's vote, but also certain people who would travel to speak in America and go to various international conferences and all that kind of thing. So it was very interesting, very well done, and very enjoyable to listen to. So then I reread an Austen variation called Longbourn Inheritance by Lara Bekendig. I actually read a lot of Lara Bekendig in December. So this one in particular was one where Mr. Bennet dies, but Elizabeth is left to manage Longbourn because Mrs. Bennet is pregnant when he dies, and this could be a son, which throws the inheritance of Longbourn up into the air. Then I finally finished Shadowfall by Alexander Freed. This is a Star Wars novel. This is the second in the Alphabet Squadron series, which I think is a trilogy. I've actually just started the third book. So this was interesting. Queer character in that Erica Quell and one of her pilots, Shas, have a sort of a subtle relationship sort of thing, or a encounter at one stage, and they kind of eye each other off a little bit. But this is very interesting. It has a very unexpected ending that I didn't see coming. So that's quite interesting. So this is about this ragtag squadron who are trying to take down Shadow Wing, which is the Imperial Fighter Squadron that is still one of the big dangers in the post Return of the Jedi Republic world. So that was enjoyable. Then I read another Lara Bekendig, which was Longbourn Christmas. This was a new one. And in this one, Miss Bingley gets injured before they can leave Netherfield, and therefore the whole Netherfield party has to stay. And that changes the way things go. So that was quite interesting and quite fun. And then I read another Austen variation called Family Secrets by Karen Kate Rowley, which is a Mrs. Bennet dies and Mr. Bennet remarries, therefore changing the way the girls are brought up type of book. I have a feeling I read this one when it was still just fan fiction, but it's changed a bit since then, but a lot of it seemed really familiar. But yeah, so that was enjoyable. And then I reread Lady Carpathian and the Bennets by Perpetua Langley. Yes, there's quite a lot of Austen variations here because I was trying to read things that I could read really, really quickly to try and catch up. And this is one where Mr. Bennet has a friend, Lady Carpathian, who suddenly descends on the Bennets and decides she's going to give Jane and Elizabeth a season in town. And that is where they first meet the Bingleys and Darcy. And then I read Asterix Volume 6. So this is the omnibus edition, which has Asterix in Switzerland, The Mansions of the Gods, and Asterix and the Laurel Wreath. None of these ones are particularly my favourite ones, but they were still really fun. And, you know, I love the Asterix comics. And the language jokes that the English translations have. I really, really enjoy those. So that got read. Then I finished my reread of The Fire Opal Mechanism by Fran Wilde. It has some vaguely lesbian characters, and this is the second book in the Gemworld series, and this was a reread because I couldn't quite remember what happened, and this is further in the future to the first one, but in the past from the third one, and involves actual time travel, and essentially is about a group that is using the power of a rogue gem in order to destroy universities and books, because everyone should have all knowledge and therefore all knowledge should be in their encyclopedia, but that completely defeats the point of actually being proper knowledge, if you know what I mean, because sometimes knowledge is not just the words on the page of a book, it is the context around the book, it is how many editions there have been, what changes have been made, and so there's this librarian and a thief who are trying to escape them and rescue the books and that kind of thing. So yes, that was fun. Then I read a new novella that I bought earlier this year called Burning Roses by S.L. Huang. So yeah, this has also got queer women in it, and it is sort of a novella about that it riffs off various fairy tales, in particular Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, some other ones. There's a Puss in Boots type of character, but it is essentially what happens, the consequence, when the people who hunt the monsters in the fairy tales have gotten old and have to face the consequences of their own prejudices and biases, and the things that means that they've lost because of the way they've behaved in the past. But it's a lovely story. I really quite liked it. Like I said, there are some queer characters, but the main relationship in there is not on the page, is not actually queer, it's a friendship. And there's a bit of a quest, and a lot of flashbacks, but it's a really good read and I really, really recommend Burning Roses by S.L. Huang. Now, what else? Then I read volume 13 of The Lumberjanes because I love the Lumberjanes. It's queer, it's feminine, it's lots of adventures. This in particular one, they're all stuck inside due to a storm, and half of the Lumberjanes end up playing this newly invented tabletop game and getting really into it, and the other half end up sneaking off to the kitchens, finding a tunnel under the main hall and going on an underground exploration that turns a bit dangerous. So yeah, but it's fun, it's the Lumberjanes and I love it. Then I read A Mirror Mended by Alex E. Harrow, which is a sequel novella to the novella from the previous year, or maybe even, can't actually remember which year, but I had previously. So the previous one was a Cinderella ripoff. No, not Cinderella. A Sleeping Beauty ripoff involving dimensional travel, and breaking the narrative to gain agency for the various Sleeping Beauties. This one ends up riffing off Snow White, and again is about breaking the narrative, but also accepting that sometimes you need to go home and accept your narrative and your agency within that narrative. So that was fun. Then I read a book that I was given for Christmas immediately. And that is this one, which came from my brother, and it was Sarah Clegg's Woman's Law, 4,000 Years of Sirens, Serpents and Succubi. So this is a non-fiction history book, and essentially she's looking at the origins of these kind of female demons who start out with Lamashta, something, I can't remember quite how to pronounce it, but starts out like 4,000 years ago with demons of childbirth. So these demons who came and killed children and infants and caused problems with pregnancies, and so essentially warding against them was a health issue for women. So they started there, and then throughout history you see it actually sort of changed. These female demons who are all linked together, Lamias and Gello and sirens and mermaids, and suddenly through history they move away from being a women's health issue to becoming about men's fears, and therefore they can become seductive. They become a threat to men instead of a threat to women. And so it's a really interesting book, and also it's really funny because she has the snarkiest footnotes. Like, the footnotes are amazing. Sometimes they're just explanatory, but they are often quite snarky, and the judgment is real about some of the stuff that she's talking about. And it's just got this thread of people, and especially men, are idiots that run through it, which is just great. I really, really enjoyed this read. It was so good, and I thoroughly recommend it. So that was an excellent book. Then I read another Austen variation, which was A Plethora of Peers by Sydney Sallier. This was a new one this year, which I had mostly read previously in the year and then forgotten about, got distracted from, and so then I just reread it and finished it this time. And in this one, it's Mr. Bennet is a second son, and his elder brother ends up dying, having just married, been forced to marry because she'd slept with him, Mrs. Bennet that we know, but the younger Mr. Bennet ends up having to inherit Longbourn because Mrs. Bennet's children end up being Catherine and Lydia, but his wife, who is the mother of Elizabeth Mary and James, who's a son, not Jane, was actually the daughter of a viscount and granddaughter of an earl, and so that changes everything. So there's all these peers in Elizabeth's background. So that was cool. Then came, the last day of the year, and I still had to read 3 things. So on the plane home, I read House Perilous by Tansy Rayner Roberts. This is the second Sparks and Filters novella. And in this one, our 2 male metallurgists from the first book end up kidnapped in the house of the woman who they were working for in the first book, who they got the filters from Fairyland for. But also that woman, that enchantress, ends up being the aunt of the children that our favourite fairy from the first book was the governess of, and they've all come to town to stay with their aunt for the season. And shenanigans ensue, and of course there is a risk to the realm. There is always a risk to the realm. So that was fun. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Very funny. And our favourite fairy, Flavia Wednesday, is queer. So that's cool. So there's that. Now, then I read, because, I only had a few hours left, I read a couple of Asterix comics digitally. So these are just individual ones, and these are new ones. So in the last few years, sort of I'm not sure if it started in like 2019, 2020, and these ones were from 2021. There's been some new ones by a new set of authors. So I read Asterix and the Chieftain's Daughter, in which the daughter of a previous chieftain who had given into Rome, but who has been protected by her father's men, is brought to stay with the village to protect her while they regroup. And she's a typical rebellious teenager, which Asterix and Obelix then have to try and watch over. And then I read Asterix and the Griffin, which is like an exploratory one where they're off to visit a friend of Getafix's in the far, far north, in the barbarian regions. And the Romans are also on their way to try and find the mythological griffin, which they believe exists. And of course, they clash, and one of the women of the tribe the barbarian tribe, who are actually the women of the fighters, She gets kidnapped, and so they go after her, and it's this whole thing. And it was fun. I think I preferred the Chieftain's Daughter one to this one, but they were still both quite fun. And that was what I read in December. Oh my goodness, I've been talking for a while. So that was the 16 things I read. Very enjoyable. It was a bit stressful because I got so close. Like, I was really struggling to try and get to the end of my goal of 120 books for the year. I've set the same goal for 2024, which I will talk about in another video. But yeah, let's hope I don't have to read 16 books in the last month of the year again this year. That'd be great. But yes, so yeah, I really enjoyed all of that reading, even if it was slightly stressful. And yeah, so always love to discuss any of those books in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you all again really soon. Bye.